What's up, everybody? This is just lots here bringing the brand new video today. Here we're going to talk about the how PSY-Frames should function in the near future, because I believe that as it stands, PSY-Frames might actually be somewhat competitive. It really depends on what happens in between now and Envision of Venom. So I just want to kind of just rattle off ideas. What kind of things that what do you guys think about what would be played in the deck in the near future? What suggestions do you have? Obviously, I'm not talking about the side deck, because I have a side deck in mind, but I didn't want to divulge it here simply because A, the side deck is my own, what I make of it, and B, the side deck is kind of exponential. It's kind of not that important when you're wanting to discuss the deck in general, because it has no functionality outside of that. So yeah, let's just jump right into it, because I feel like that this in my opinion, I feel like PSY-Frames are going to be very, very competitive in the near future. Not through the Dark Illusions, because the Dark Illusions doesn't help it nearly as much as Invasion of Venom does. But I want to point out that the fact that this deck is going to be very, very different how it plays as well. It's going to be much more centered on the control variant, or not the control variant, but the much more pure variant than the Yosenju variant, or whatever variant that you might come up with this deck. So that's why you're going to be wanting to run two multi-threader, because multi-threader not only has the ability to discard this card instead of killing your opponent's instead of killing a monster. So, for example, if you want, say, like, your driver to remain on the board for whatever reason after you use its effect, or something like that after you use an effect, or you just have a monster, like you have a synchro monster on the board that you still want to protect. You want to say, for example, you want to protect Zeta, you can discard this card instead, and that's how you're going to get this card in the graveyard mostly. Also, you have the ability to special summon this card along with other monsters. So, for example, if you summon another PSY-Frame monster, like you summon a Zeta or you summon a Omega, you can summon this card in defense mode right on top of it. Now, obviously, there's a card in here that might actually seem like it'd be a perfect fit with this deck now, and that would be Emergency Teleport. But the reason why I don't have it in here is because I'm still testing different styles of the deck. Emergency Teleport might make its way in eventually, but as of right now, I feel like that Emergency Teleport is a bit too far of a stretch for this deck to kind of make that bit of a sense right now. Again, I'm still going to be testing everything as it goes on. It doesn't really anti-synergize with this deck, but I still feel like that I want to test other things before that. So, yes. The next card you might want to cut. If you're playing Wind Up Rabbit. If you're playing Wind Up Rabbit like at 3, like I am, you might want to cut it down to 2, simply because you want to make room for other cards that have just come out. For example, you want to make room for Pot of Avidity, which I'll talk about in a second, as well as Multi-Threader, if that's what you take out for. The main issue with this card is because it can be stuck on the board sometimes. So if your opponent's playing like some random stuff, your opponent negates this effect or something. It's kind of devastating because you can't do anything, but this alternatively, this card forces your opponent to play the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! In a much drastic way. I don't understand why people don't play this card more often, because this card is great for luring your opponent into doing things, and that's what this card is mainly for. Next is Kuribandit. Kuribandit is actually another one of those cards. Believe it or not, it's kind of very similar to Wind Up Rabbit in very many ways, simply because it also forces your opponent to do something about it, or not to do something about it, to play the game, because you can because you have a battle phase before your end phase, so you can just keep poking your opponent. You can just poke your opponent with that. Obviously, you're not going to want this card to stay on the board, because your opponent's just going to sit there with that 1000 attacker, and they're not going to do anything until they eventually get tired of it and they kill it or something, or they OTK you in the next turn. So you're going to want to do it for that 1000, and then you're going to want to kill it, and then search out your 5 cards, search out your spell trap from the top 5 cards of your deck. So yeah, I think 3 Delta, 3 Gamma, 3 Beta, 3 Alphas, that relatively stays the same. The reason because is their names, and they're really good cards still. Alpha, I'm actually really half tempted to cut this to 2 and put in something else in there and in a place for it. I'm actually really contemplating Thunder King cards like Thunder King Ryo, or something else along the lines that kind of stalls your opponent out a little bit more, or just kind of just playing cards like let's see here, something that would be a decent option for it, like Raigeki, of course, Upstart Goblin if you want that. But I think Alpha here is kind of the worst card in the deck right now, other than Epsilon, obviously. But I still said deck 3 Epsilon. Might even play Burial from the Different Dimension if that's something that piques your interest. But ultimately, I feel like that at 3 these cards synergize better than they do. So I'm not going to change that much with it. But if I do, Alpha is going to be the first card to go to 2. The next card that I think that should probably be in this deck is Cardcar D. Cardcar D is a fantastic card, simply because because it lets you draw 2 cards, which is obviously very good. And since you're not going to be doing much after that, because you're probably going to be setting a few cards, playing this card, drawing your 2 cards, possibly playing your circuit after, or possibly playing your circuit beforehand, or you're setting a couple of overloads plus an Avarice plus Pot of Avidity, or something along those lines. This card is going to be much better for that aspect. So, yeah. Maxx are expendable. Like I said, if you want to play something else for this card, this can jump immediately into the side deck. But I choose the main deck simply because of Burning Abyss is very popular in my area. So, so this really does counter Burning Abyss quite a lot. Not that I have a particularly tough time against Burning Abyss, but it does helps win the game more. So if you can win the game more, then you should probably win the game. Next up is Psychic Field Zone. This card should be self-explanatory, simply because Psychic Field Zone is one of the best cards it's kind of one of the best cards in PSY-Frames in general. It's the best Psychic type card in my opinion, simply because this card has very many synergies with this deck. If you don't open up a Circuit and you open up with this card, you're kind of okay. You want Circuit in your hand ultimately, but this card is a really good supplement for that. But but there are some times where this card just simply isn't enough, because it does special summon in defense position, which is kind of a bummer. But you really don't need that. You really don't worry about that, considering that both the PSY-Frame monster targets that you can do kind of remove themselves off the field, as well as Thought Ruler Archfiend is okay, and plus it also kind of opens you up for plays with Overmind Archfiend, which I'm going to discuss right now since I'm on the topic of it. Basically, what this card is: you target one Psychic type monster in your graveyard, banish it when this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, and special summon as many cards that was banished that this card banished. So, for example, let's say your opponent. Let's say you banished 2 PSY-Frames. Let's say you banished Multi-Threader and, I guess, Gamma. Well, now you get to special summon 2 PSY-Frames when this card dies. Not to mention this card is 3,300 attack, so it's going to be kind of a big boss monster. Your opponent's going to have to deal with this card, because they can't just simply leave it alone. And the reason why this card does work in PSY-Frames is because you can use this card, because it just says 1 tuner plus 1 and more non-tuner. It ignores the conditions. It ignores the materials required to summon this card. So I've ruled this with judges, and that's what they've confirmed, that Psychic Field Zone kind of just mitigates the 2 or more Psychic type non-tuner monsters. So, and the next card is Pot of Avidity. As I said, I'm wanting to test it out. I'm testing it at 2 and playing a third in the side deck to see how it goes. I might switch it to 3 if it ends up being 3 is better than 2, but as of right now, I think 2 is kind of fine. Having the capability of putting your banished monsters back into the deck is kind of crucial, simply because it puts you in a better position. From what I've been playing though, this card / Psychic Path have been kind of counterintuitive with Psychic Field Zone a little bit. There have been times where I've had Psychic Field Zone where if I did Psychic Field Zone, it would be a better play than just putting them back in my hand, or in this case, back into my deck. But you could do this in the off chance that doesn't happen. So that's what leads me to play this at 2. Mostly because of this card is very, I guess, lackluster after you do that. And you don't want to, and having the ability that this card recycles itself after you use its effect, because you put that back 3 cards and then you shuffle your deck, and then you and then you draw another card replacing itself, because you're more than likely going to play this in your hand when you desperately need some kind of resource. Additionally, it does happen to activate during your opponent's turn, so it's really good in that aspect, which makes it much better than Psychic Field Zone. Plus there isn't a cost attached to it. Not that really mattered, but it's just overall better in almost every single way. Plus you get an extra card back from it. You get to put back an extra bench card. The only downside is that it doesn't go back to your hand, which you really didn't want anyway, because that might actually just end up being bad for you in some way, shape, or form. And 3 Circuit, 3 Overload. I'm still playing the 3 Duality, simply because Duality kind of sends out your deck. You don't special summon on your turn, so it's all good. And the last card that I want to talk about is Avarice. Jar of Avarice is really good. Actually, it's not the last card I want to talk about, but it's one of the cards I want to talk about. Is because since you're playing Kuribandit, it kind of mitigates this card, because you're playing Kuribandit to get the 2 drivers out of your deck, because you don't want to draw into them, because Driver is really, really bad in your hand. It is obscenely bad in your hand. It's actually kind of depressing how bad it is in your hand, but this card kind of helps you recoup some of those lost cards. Like, it recoups your wind-up rabbits, it recoups your Psy-Frame monsters that you desperately need, and it replaces itself afterwards, so it's pretty good. I want to explain some of the extra deck choices and why I'm choosing them over others. I'm choosing to play Meteor Burst Dragon. The reason why I'm playing Meteor Burst Dragon in this build particularly is because at this current moment in time, Cosmos exists. Now, by the time Invasion of Venom comes out, Cosmos might not exist, and I might not have a use for this card. But then again, I'm probably still going to be playing this card, simply because it's not a bad level 7 to go into once more effects like this one, or more like Cosmos, come out. Because they're going to come out. This card is going to be very, very good. So, another card that I want to just talk about is a Stardust Dragon. I used to run Spark Dragon over this card, but then I came to the realization that this card is much better, simply because it stops Raigeki. It stops your opponent from saying, "Oh, main phase 2, you baited me, main phase 2, Raigeki." This card says no to that, or something like that. It does a lot of other good stuff, like it prevents it. It's not very easy to get rid of. So that's basically almost everything that I want to talk about. I still think 2-2 is very good. I used to play 3 Zeta, 2 Omega, but I realized that 2-2 is a very good variant for me. Then again, some people might say 3 Omega is the best, and some people might not say that. So yeah. Anyway, guys, tell me what you guys think about this deck in the comments down below. Also, please let me know what you guys think about this deck. What decks do you think you're playing? What decks are you playing? Let me know, so I may test them, because I'm willing to test anything. And also, tell me if there's something that you disagree with this deck. I'm willing to accept some criticism about the deck that I genuinely like, actually, because I generally like Psy-Frames. People say that no one likes Psy-Frames, but I like this deck a lot. So anyway, guys, I'll see you guys in the next video. This has been Just Lance, and I am signing